3, 2, 1, and welcome everyone to this episode of the Real Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Edwards. Joining us today, folks, is Roy Notowitz, the founder and president of Noto Group. Roy, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Of course. So you run a podcast called How I Hire.
That is correct.
A lot of organizations, of course, everything what's happening in the economy right now, are struggling with finding great candidates and, of course, employees. First, before we dive into that, I want to start a little bit about your background and how you started your impact journey. What is the origin of Noto Group?
Yeah, well, Noto Group is 12 and a half, 13 years old. We became a certified B Corp in 2013, so one of the first search firms in our industry sector and in the world to become B Corp certified. And you know, if I look back upon my earlier years, I learned about the value of helping people. In college, I was a volunteer EMT and spent some time working on ambulances and helping people. And I think that was a seed if I really reflect back on that experience. And then graduated from college, went to grad school, came to Portland, and I was recruiting for Nike and kind of in the corporate world and sort of just got busy doing stuff. And it wasn't until I started my own firm and started thinking about community and being involved that seed came back around helping people and wanting to be connected to the greater good beyond just filling jobs. And so we started on that journey, mostly trying to be a good firm and being able to attract good people to my firm. And then that intention has sort of snowballed into us being really thoughtful about only working with purpose and mission-driven brands in the consumer space, or companies that we identify or characterize as good companies, which we define as authentic leadership, meaningful career opportunities, and great culture. And then if there's a sustainability or better for you or a world positive kind of thing that those companies do, that's amazing.
And there's two tracks I want to kind of cover in this conversation. So one's from the employer side, the hiring side, and one's from the getting hired side.
Yes.
From the employer side, what's been the big transition or shift that you've seen over the past 13 years?
Oh, gosh. Well, first of all, technology has connected us more than ever. I mean, LinkedIn wasn't even a thing when I started recruiting. And, so I think what that's done is before, when we would begin a search requirements gathering session with a client or with a business, they'd be looking for 3 or 4 or 5 different dimensions in an individual in order to be successful in that business. Now, with the complexity of the world and with technology and with our ability to connect to so many people, the criteria has just added more and more dimensions. So they want they want all these things in one person, if that makes sense. And because technology has advanced our productivity overall, one person can do much more now than they could do years ago with just the way that technology is helping us achieve more faster. And so I think there's also different elements, like, it used to be sustainability, for example, was somebody's job. Now that's part of everyone's job. And so there's different elements around leadership and different capabilities and competencies that companies really need, and true leadership is really hard to find.
And from the getting hired side, the person getting recruited or searching for a job, technology's been a big shift. What are some other changes that you've seen over the 13 years?
From that perspective, again, I think it just creates more competition for jobs. So even though talent and leadership is scarce, again, they're looking for something very specific, usually within one role. And so there's lots of candidates and competition, because before it might be just somebody who applied for a job, and maybe the other people in the pool didn't really hear about it because unless they were looking for a job or on monster.com or all these places, they wouldn't necessarily know that it even existed, and therefore there was less competition. Now everyone's so connected that as soon as we start networking a job within our talent ecosystem, everyone kind of knows about it, and then that creates more people in the top of the funnel, which allows us to be more selective, if that makes sense. And so it gets harder in that way, easier in the sense that they might hear about more opportunities more readily. And then of course, LinkedIn is an incredible tool that has sort of changed the game.
Right. And when we think about the term, the talent war right now, bring our viewers into the fold. Where are we currently in this war? What is happening? What are some of the pain points from a competition perspective can business owners take away from this?
Gosh, I mean, I think there's three things that companies need to think about, and I call it the 3 C's. So culture, it needs to be a good place to work.
Right.
So that's important. That's sort of table stakes now. And when I say good place to work, it's not just, and now it's remote, and things like that, but it's not just, having, beer on tap and kombucha or things like that. It's actually really investing in the success of your team, creating learning opportunities, development, all those things. So the culture is really important. And then career growth. So is this a meaningful opportunity? Am I going to learn from this opportunity? Is it there meat on the bone? Is this a meaningful challenge where I'm going to just add to my toolkit or have a success or an accomplishment that I can put on my resume? And then the third, and probably most important, is compensation. So if it doesn't make financial sense, people aren't going to make a move. And then you add on top of that other variables like relocation and things. That eliminates 80% of the pool if you say you want the person to live in a specific area and they're not in that particular location. With COVID, though, some of that has changed. So a larger percentage of companies are open to leaders working and leading teams remotely, and or having a hybrid situation where maybe they were on the wrong side of San Francisco and wouldn't have relocated, pre-COVID, but now if they can get to the office 2 days a week and drive 2 hours, they can make it work, right? So I think it just has opened up a little bit more flexibility, but at the same time, it's sometimes harder for the employer to get somebody to relocate. So there's all these variables that the employer can choose, right? And depending on what they choose, depends on the level of difficulty of the search and their access to talent. If they're open to somebody living anywhere, then they have many more options, and the ability to attract somebody at the right compensation with the right experience is greater. But if they really are narrow on certain things, then of course their options are limited.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. And if you were to pie chart it, a nice little graph, how many people get hired from referrals, like the old school way, versus now like LinkedIn or some other third-party recruiting firm?
I don't know the actual statistics and data in terms of the pie chart. I know just from our own experience that our network gets us 5 to 10% of the way. Sometimes we have the person in mind before we even start a search, but timing comes into play, like when somebody's available and compensate. All these variables, again, come into play as to whether or not that person will be interested in that job. I think the narrative of why that opportunity is really compelling, or the company employment brand, or the compensation package, or the upside potential, all these factors kind of come into play. I would say the number one is somebody who's connected to somebody else. So basically, your own network, if you're doing your own job search, is the number one place you should be spending time. 6 out of 10 times, you're going to find a job through somebody that already knows your capabilities and can get you into the hiring process. That said, there's a huge emphasis now on inclusive and diverse candidate pools. And so what that means is companies want to make sure they're taking into account the entire candidate pool, and that they're looking from a much broader mix of candidates and bringing those candidates into the mix and making a determination versus just going with somebody that they know without having a consistent and fair and open and collaborative process where they're engaging with a broader pool.
And I guess I've found that with a lot of companies, they are making sure to include that on the descriptions or anything that talks about, just make sure they're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I watched a video on I think it was a chief people officer at Google saying, when we hit the point in our company where we were relying on someone's aunt, cousin, uncle referral, that's when our growth seemed to slow. How important is having an intention on diversity, equity, and inclusion for long-term hiring and retention in your organization?
I mean, it's everything. I mean, there's data to show that having a diverse workforce gets better business results. Having multiple perspectives is really important, and I think it's not. Diversity comes in a lot of different ways. So I think where companies sometimes fall down is they think of diversity just in terms of ethnicity or color or other things that you can see. And I think diversity, again, it's a broad range. It's women, it's men, it's people with disabilities, it's people of different ages. So I think it's important to think about diversity in the context of your own team, and then also in the broader context, but also diversity of thoughts and ideas and experiences, right? So everyone brings different experiences. So maybe that looks like hiring somebody from outside of your industry sector, as an example, can bring different diversity to your company.
Speaking about the boom in Portland, shipbuilding at that time, that was a booming industry. It drove a lot of people to Portland, really grew the city and the communities that we have today, the makeup that we have today. What are some of the more attractive industries and jobs that you're seeing out there?
So my perspective is all consumer products because that's what we work in.
Okay.
So we don't work in technology or finance or other places, but we work across the broad spectrum of consumer. So what that is, healthy active lifestyles is kind of how the majority of our clients sort of fit into that category.
Got it.
For example, during COVID, that was really beneficial for us because people are still running, they're riding bikes, they're interested in functional beverages and healthy living, and so cooking at home, and so I think that's a trend, is like healthy active lifestyles and also connection to purpose and mission. We didn't know it at the time when we became a B Corp. But we've really intersected with something that's resonating with the talent pool around people wanting to be connected to the greater good and to have jobs and work for companies that actually are doing good things and where they can connect what they're doing to something that's more meaningful. And I think that's a trend.
And for the business leaders listening to this, curious about best hiring practices, what is the most common mistake that a lot of business leaders or executives make when going through a search?
That's a great question. There's so many opportunities to make mistakes. I think the first and most important thing is you have to get really clear on what the success profile is on the front end of the search. Oftentimes during the search, it's a bit of an iterative process depending on the size of the company and their needs. However, and that's okay because we learn as we go through talking to candidates and sort of fine-tuning and calibrating on the search. But I think it's really important to really think about the core competencies and where the business wants to go and how it wants to get there. So starting with, especially at the executive level, starting at the strategic level around what does the business need, what is going to complement our existing leadership and help us get to where we need to go and sort of be the unlock for our business. I think the second thing is rushing the process or not having a comprehensive or diverse candidate pool to select from. Sometimes our clients get fatigued around the process because there's a lot of interviews. Again, we don't know who's available until we start shaking the trees and seeing who's out there. And it's a lot of work to make contact, establish interest, get somebody through the process. And they're also happily employed, and there's a bit of an attraction piece that needs to happen. Like the candidate needs to be compelled to make a move. And it's not just for more money, it's all those things we talked about. And so I think companies that sort of don't take time to think about, how are we going to market with our job and how, what's our narrative as a company, as a brand, and where we are in our business cycle. It's okay if like you need to turn things around, or if you're having challenges, actually being really honest about what those are really important, because you want to attract or repel somebody who doesn't want to take on that challenge or be part of that mission. And so I think it's being really accurate about what the job is and what the challenges are and what you want the person to accomplish. And then, really just having a thoughtful process throughout. And then the last thing I would say is making sure that there's a leadership integration or onboarding and transition process to support, whether it's several new leaders coming in or one new leader coming in, to make sure that those relationships and the trust and that, the new ways of working and that this person is integrated into the business successfully, so that you can accelerate their time to success and impact.
Let's talk about that integration process a little bit. Do a lot of newly hires tend to leave right after they get hired?
Especially at the executive level and with founder transitions, there's a honeymoon period where everything's great and they hired the right person. But inevitably, after a few months, once that person wraps their head around the business and identifies what needs to happen, maybe there's a founder or other leaders involved where the new leader needs to start making decisions, making changes, investing in new directions, and that makes it uncomfortable for the founder, because what is their new role, and defining their new role as well, if they're staying involved in the company or if they're exiting. There's lots of emotions and feelings around that as well. And so one of the things that's unique about our firm is that we support founder transitions and what we call leadership integration and acceleration. So we don't just fill the job and then walk away. We are able to provide leadership assessment, as well as coaching and workshops and team building and things like that around that new leader or that new leadership team that's coming together to take the business to the next level.
And I love how you're saying, hey, you gotta be really transparent. What happens when the expectations aren't really what this new leader thought they were, or what the search firm thought they were? Yeah,
that does happen. Sometimes it ties to like the balance sheet or financial status of the company, where they don't really know until they dig in. And so we try to, again, it ties to being working with companies that we believe in and that we have that trust and transparency with and that partnership with. So hopefully that doesn't happen. At the same time, I think I would say that is a thing. And that creates problems. And either the person leaves quickly, or they try to work things out and work through those things. And it just really depends on how much different reality is from what they had thought it was coming in. And also different things happen. We placed a CEO and president 2 weeks before COVID hit, and then everything changed with that business because of COVID. So sometimes there's just things that you can't even predict,
Right.
And so that's, you need, I think, learning agility, adaptability, things like that are important leadership characteristics, and to the extent that they need to use those.
And for the person looking for new opportunities right now, it's a really good job market. They're in a great position, looking for new opportunities. What advice do you have for those people? What should be on their resume? How should they go about their search?
I think first it's really thinking about the end destination with their career. Like, where do they want to go with their career? And also just thinking about the criteria, the matrix of, what needs to exist for me to be able to make that leap. Is there something that's missing in my current role that I want to bring into my experience? Or do I want to work for a more purpose and mission-driven company because I'm not feeling really connected to the greater good in my current company? So I think first it's just, do I want to work for a big company or a small company? What are those experiences going to be like? And thinking through not only just balancing your career, but really just kind of like, as you gain an experience, you kind of learn what you like and don't like, and you have less tolerance for stuff that doesn't fit into for BS or for politics or for whatever scenario that you just might not want to deal with anymore. So I think, and the more experience and the more capable you are, the more choices you have. And so I think it's really, personal decision based on what your goals are. If you want to work for a private equity funded company and have an upside, or if you want to work for, a purpose trust or employee-owned company, those are two different horses. And so really comes down to, really digging deep and understanding what kind of experience you want to get and what are you trying, what's going to be meaningful for your career.
And Roy, what's the end game for you, just personally speaking, when you exit this organization? What's the legacy you want to leave?
Well, I've been thinking a lot about that, actually. And, my firm does a lot of great things. We donate 1% of revenue to causes we believe in. My team is really connected to the purpose and mission of our clients, and so our purpose is to amplify the positive impact of individuals and teams. And so I'd love to see that legacy continue, and that might look like a purpose trust or some sort of employee-owned thing, or we might sell to another firm. But I haven't found a lot of firms out there that really match our values. There's a lot of corporate, bigger recruiting firms that don't understand what we're all about. We have our own mojo and our own vibe. Our vision is to be the go-to firm for good companies, and so that we want to stick with that. And our mission every day we come to work is to build authentic leadership teams that excel and endure. And so I'd love to see that legacy continue after me. I haven't figured out exactly what that path is. I figure I have about 10 years at least to figure that out, because I still love what I do, and my team, we're at this really amazing, we've doubled in the last 2 years, and we have a lot of momentum right now in the industry sectors that we're serving. So we're actually in the process of thinking about the future and what that holds. But my goal is to continue I'm growth oriented. I think everything healthy grows, as one of my colleagues and clients said to me in the past in terms of how they've built their teams.
Very wise advice, and congratulations on all the growth, by the way. I think leaving things way better than you found them is a great mark of a good leader. Let's bring this home, Roy. What is your definition of a real leader?
Oh, gosh. I think it's somebody who is self-aware and knows their strengths and weaknesses and can articulate those, and somebody who's on a learning journey, constantly learning, applying new information, unlearning, adapting. I feel like, somebody who wants to truly invest in the success of other people. And, just somebody who's authentic, inclusive, connected to purpose, able to build high-performance teams, and somebody who truly cares about other people and their success beyond their own ego or their own reasons for, making money or other things. I feel like leaders are really, they're going to look at the team first when there's challenges and take care of them and try to figure out problems, and then think about themselves, sort of last.
Well put. For Roy Notowitz, I'm Kevin Edwards, asking you to go out there, invest in the success of your people, and always, folks, keep it real.
Thank you. It's great to meet you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Of course.